The Cult of Cthaeghya. A band of adventurers led by the fearless Dalinsia of Cimmeria had been hired by King Yildiz of Terrain to investigate a mysterious cult that had been raiding villages near the border of Zamora. The cultists wore black robes and masks and carried strange weapons that emitted flashes of light and sound. They also seemed to worship some ancient horror they called Cthaeghya, the half-sister and mate of the dreaded Cthulhu. Dalinsia and her companions followed a trail of the cultists to a hidden valley in the mountains, where they discovered a large temple carved into the rock. The temple was guarded by several sentries, but Dalinsia and her band managed to sneak past them and enter the dark halls. There they witnessed a horrifying sight. Hundreds of cultists gathered around a huge pit, chanting and dancing in a frenzy. In the center of a pit, a monstrous shape rose from the depths. A gigantic octopus-like creature with tentacles, claws, wings, and a massive eyes. It was Cthaeghya, the spawn of madness. The adventurers realized they had stumbled upon a ritual to awaken Cthaeghya and unleash her upon the world. They knew they had to stop it, or else all life would be doomed. Dalinsia drew her sword and shouted a battle cry, charging at the nearest cultist. Her band followed her, fighting their way through the crowd. The cultists were taken by surprise, but soon recovered and fought back with their strange weapons. The flashes and bangs filled the air, along with screams and blood. Dalinsia reached the edge of the pit and leaped over it, landing on one of Cthaeghya's tentacles. She hacked at it with her sword, causing the beast to roar in pain. She then climbed up the tentacle, aiming for the creature's head. Cthaeghya sensed her presence and lashed out at her with her other limbs. Dalinsia dodged and parried, but was soon overwhelmed by the sheer number and speed of her attacks. She felt a sharp pain in her side as one of her claws pierced her flesh. She gritted her teeth and swung her sword again, severing another tentacle. Meanwhile, her other companions were still fighting the cultists, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. One by one they fell to the ground, wounded or dead. The cultists cheered as they saw their enemies fall and resumed their chanting. They believed that Cthaeghya would soon rise from the pit and grant them power and glory. Dalinsia was the last one standing, but she was also losing her strength and blood. She knew she had no chance of killing Cthaeghya by herself, but she refused to give up. She looked around and saw a large metal rod leaning against the wall near the pit. It was connected to a coil of wires that ran along the floor into a metal box with knobs and switches. Dalinsia guessed that it was one of the cult's weapons, perhaps more powerful than the others. She decided to use it against Cthaeghya. She jumped off the tentacle and ran towards the rod. She grabbed it and lifted it over her head, aiming at Cthaeghya's head. She hoped that it would work as she expected. She pressed the button on the rod and threw it at Cthaeghya. The rod flew over the air and through Cthaeghya's head with a large clang. A bright flash flowed by. The loud boom erupted from the rod, sending sparks flying in all directions. The wire attached to the rod snapped and sparked as well, creating a web of electricity around Cthaeghya's body. Cthaeghya screamed in agony as she was electrocuted by the rods and wires. Her body twitched and convulsed and went limp. She sank back into the pit, dead or unconscious. The cultists were stunned by what they saw. They stopped their chanting and stared at Dalinsia, disbelief and fear. Dalinsia smiled grimly and raised her sword in triumph. She had killed Cthaeghya. She had saved the world. She was Dalinsia. Snowhunter.